Good morning, and thank you for the invitation, Nicola and Katja. And I start with this paper about the idea of Ars experimentalis. And hey, Nick, you are a hero. You are my hero, definitely. Okay. In Cuestiones Naturales, Abelardus of Bath placed the organic distinction between soul faculties in the position of each brain lobe, chelae or cellulae. According to a wrong attribution, which he thought was in Aristotle physics. Fantasia in back lobe, ratione in the middle lobe, and memoria in the occipital lobe. The text in the handout is number 1. Despite this inaccurate attribution to Aristotle, Abelard introduces one part of the brain that is able to capture the perceptive experience, sensuale experimentum. Although Abelard does not use the term sensus communis, that faculty transmits to the rest of the brain lobes, fantasia, imaginatio, et memoria, the perceptual data. In this dialogue, Abelardus' answer seeks to show how the functional distinction of brain lobes and at the same time the human soul faculties, called afterwards internal senses, depend on the organic disposition of human soul to have and to collect perceptual or sensitive experimenta from the contact with extramental things, res extra animam. In this sense, human beings tend by nature to have experiences because we are open to the world by our sensory organic disposition. Please, give me your consent to advance until the 14th century. At that time, there was a man, or there was a master who loved lambs and children, William of Ockham. In his Commentarium Sententiarum, Libro Prima Distinctione Tertia, he quotes an Aristotelian excerpt from the Anima and Physics. This is the text number 2. Children usually call anyone father or mother until a time comes when they determine who between men and women is rightly her father or mother. That process happens as a series of tests, and we could call it experimentality. At this point, Ockham introduces the other example, the lovely little lambs that are in the herd or flock, follows any sheep, no matter if the sheep is black or white, until the little lamb gets to identify his mother. Beyond the nature of knowledge that Ockham vindicates in this classic text about particular intuition of singular objects, notitia intuitiva, and its relation with general conception, we see so clearly how the term experimentality is employed to describe a reception of a set of singular tests, notitiae, all of them not necessarily right, until a child or a little lamb achieve an identification of the right parental relationship. In this example, the outcome of experimenta determines which is the specific member of the species, human or ovine, that is the parent. Those examples can show to us how the experience has a deeply naturalistic meaning in the Middle Ages. Human beings have a perceptual animal constitution which is represented by brain cells and the childhood learning. Therefore, okay, thank you very much. Where are the slides? Here? Yeah, you have to. Please give me a minute. Where is the slides? It's important to start with this example. Okay. I continue.
Yeah, it's just the 5. You have to.
Okay. You see the first one. Oh, this is. Thank you very much, Nicola.
Yes.
I continue with this and okay. And therefore, it shows the background of experience. On the one hand, its perceptual condition, and on the other hand, the repetition according to a set of tests in order to achieve the connection between a singular and a general conception. Occam went so far when quoting a sentence of commentator, in which appears the two sides, virtutes, of this sensory condition of human knowledge. This is the second test in number 2, and you have the quote of Averroes. I forget mention the wrong attribution of Adelardus Vatensis is maybe in some commentaries to Galenic test from Salernitan school. You have an example from a manuscript. Okay. This virtus, the term that is quite important for this paper is the term virtus experimentativa. Entia sensibilia dividintur in duplex esse, scilicet in hoc singularet et in suam formam, necesse est ut virtus experimentativa, it est comprehensiva comprehendat ea, aut per duas virtutes, aut per unam, sed duabus dispositionibus diversis. The virtus experimentativa, that is 2 in 1 or 1 in 2, depends on the perspective, represents the first contact with the objects extra animam, singulars. Meanwhile, this ability leads to the comprehension of the forma per se of the singular, comprehended by perceptual contact. The examples of children and lambs are a good analogy of this procedure. A child, after calling anyone father, identifies suddenly the singular who is really her father. That basic process that happens in the first period of animal life tends necessarily to improve its complexity. I come back briefly to Adelard of Bath. After his exposition of brain lobes, chelas, and soul faculties, he explains how an accident hit on the head does not pull out the abilities of human soul. This fact shows how the sensitive part of the soul, while it operates, is able to recognize a non-sensitive and intellectual aspect of the object's extra animam. It's so early to talk about brain plasticity, but the metaphor is quite similar. In sum, experimentum is the way to access the extra animam objects and to comprehend its forma per se. The complex improvement happens while the soul operation emerges in relation to a specific forma per se. Regarding to trivium, that forma will be a genus or a species in the predicative line, the multiple meanings of terms and the grammatical role of a word, or the emotional character of a persuasive speech. Thus, the complexity goes up in quadrivium and mechanical art such as medicine, sailing, or trade. Much more when we talk about the demonstrative science, because the first principles can assimilate by observations and argumentation, according to Analytica Posteriora. Other examples are the prognosis disciplines, law, theological disputes, or the contemplative life. Medieval masters called arts to those disciplines. Since all of them were in pursuit of a productive goal. In the following minutes, I would like to show you the flexibility of medieval arts, liberales et mechanicas, in relation to the medieval improvement of complexity that the notion of experientia suffered along the 13th century. My point of departure will be medieval commentary of the first book of Metaphysics, specifically Aquinas' commentary and the invention of the expertise regarding to the Lulian art. Then I am going to abord two complex examples of experientia experimentum that are mentioned by Buridanus in his commentary to physics, magnetism phenomenon and the application of ruibarbarum in the imbalance of elemental humors. To conclude, I would like to point out the translatio, of this complex notion of experientia from the scholastic environments to the vernacular languages. I'm going to show it by two examples. The Catalan works of Ramon Llull and one of the biggest vernacular encyclopedia of 13th century, Le Roman de la Rose. Experientiam facit artem. Occam's quotation helps us to appreciate the oscillation of experientia between two terms or aspects of it. The first one is the singular by notitiae intuitive in a set of repetitions, and the second one is a set of tests that lead to recognition of general notions, universal. In a quick glance, they are the two aspects of the one notion, experientia, and singular is also double, since experientia proceeds from its relation with the general notion in a similar way that general conception has a double relation with the test, experientia, and the singular, notitia intuitive. Occam's prefer exposing these relations by the commentator's analogy. In this way, this sort of relations could be represented as a right line that connects a term A with a term B. A is the notitia intuitive. This is the wrong version, man. Yes, it's the wrong version. Sorry, I have to. Okay, no problem. I remember one. No. A is the notitia intuitive of the singular, and B is the species, sensible species. The line is the virtus experimentativa. In some cases, those terms have a relation with other terms C that connects through A, C, and B. Occam wonders how a right line really can represent a complex relation between A, C as A singular, C the universal, and B as a species, sensible, species fantastica, or whatever. A right line is not enough to represent the oscillation of virtus experimentativa, since the term C is other term apparently out of the first relation but connected with it. The commentator suggests that possibly the best form of this relation will be a spiral. The term B is the line as a general one step in the way to the general conception, accompanied by the repetition and oscillation of experientia between the singular A and the C universal. The comprehension of its general meanings in the universal and each notitia intuitive. This is the, I don't know if this word, this is the ship in the first example. A is the singular, B is a species. And the idea is, do you know how is a question in the 14th and 13th century? You have first introduction of the different perspective, and after Occam introduced his solution. And the idea is to position the two first perspective comes from Henri de Gand and Thomas of Aquinas. And the idea is maybe he understands that the ship that departs from A, the singular, to B, the species sensible, this is a scheme or an analogy enough to explain how the first one, the singular, represents in the experientia sensitiva the capture of the sensible species, the imagination species. The other one is the position of Henri de Gand. Henri de Gand thinks that the ship could take this way, and after return to the singular. This is the position of Henri de Gand, and is the linea reflexiva, linea recta, linea reflexiva. And the position of Averroes is the third one, a spiral, and this is the movement, no? poor sheep, no, poor lamb is dizzy now. But the idea is that the idea is you have a series of experience, and in the middle you have the curve. Averroes, according to the Latin text, took in the commentary of the second, you have the quotation, the Anima, book 3, T9. The idea is, in some part of the perception and recognition of sensible or species in the imagination, you have a curve that goes directly to the universal conception. But you have to return to the singular, you have to return to the sensible species. The idea is constantly on return. I think that this B1, B2, B3, Bn is a series of a repetition of this kind of oscillation. And the idea is isn't enough a reflection, isn't enough the linea recta. We have to think the experientia in a spiral way. The spiral chain that connects experientia with the general test and singular's repetitions can be applied to the relation between sciences, disciplines, and arts. Thomas of Aquinas introduces this relation in the sentence experientia in hominibus fit scientia et ars. The argument shows that experientia in artem is a way to prepare a right operation. This modus praedictus lies in the memory, and the different memories make experimentalis scientia. In this way, experientia is about singular, and ars gathers general conceptions, universal. The operation of arts happen in singulars, but it is the efficient execution of the artistic operation which highlights the general conception of the artist, called expertus. This is the text number 3. The complexity of experientia is even more rich. If we see the relation of different artists related by the same art, for example, navigatio, sailing, navigation, the common root of this artist is the knowledge of general conceptions in relation with the right operation. Building a ship implies the knowledge of general conceptions, arcos or principia, and the way to construct techne ars. For instance, a carpenter prepares the wood, gives form to it, and puts together every part in a right order. Other artist is the ship's captain, gobernator, who takes the ended product in order to achieve the trade or army task. In some way, he knows the principia of sailing and operates according to them to accomplish the nautical routes. Ramon Llull indicates what are the principles of sailing, artem of navigatione, artem or navigatio, artem, and what is the operation that should be executed by ship's captain. This text of Ramon Llull is the what's happening here? Okay. Factory Sententia Thomas de Aquinas is Ars Generalis. Ars Generalis Ultima is number 4. Ramon Llull indicates Ramon Llull indicates what are the principles of sailing and what is the operation that should be executed by a ship's captain. Navis in uno tempore est, et in uno loco, et alio tempore in alio loco. Quoniam geometria et arithmetica descendunt ab arte ista us superius probatum est in suis locis. This quote comes from Ars Generalis Ultima, 1308. This Lullian work has also a description of a geometrical instrument used by sailors in the Mediterranean Sea to define a point to departure, the arriving harbor, and the route. This is a good example of relation between artium principia and the efficient operation. Llull describes a square divided in four triangles. That square is placed according to the point of departure, the direction, and the order of the winds in the examples cited by Llull. The winds are Tresmontana and Echalog. The first wind flows from the north and the second from the southeast, while the direction of the route is somewhere in the east. The use of these instruments depends on the season, the knowledge of the wind speed, the interpretation of maritime maps, and the use of a sound clock. All those data, along with the route, should be used by the sailor to keep an arriving harbor. In his work, Llull omitted the use of practical information, but at the end of the paragraph, he justified his lapse. I think it's the second part of the text in Ars Generalis, Ultima, number 4. De Tresmontana et ferro non oportet loqui, nam de illis experientiam habemus. And doubly, Llull wants to emphasize the mathematical principles that make the sailing a discipline derived from geometry, since the experienced knowledge about winds, Tresmontana and Echalog, or magnetism is a question for natural philosophy. I have a slide about this instrument. It's quite complicated. It's quite complicated, and some experts in the history of navigation doesn't put his hands on the fire in favor of the knowledge of sailor knowledge of this kind of calculus. This calculus take in account the two winds. One is Levante wind, another is Echalog. Levante is to east, Echalog from southeast, and Tresmontana comes from north. The idea is if you focus the route from point A to B, you have a measure. The measure is milliaria, more or less 100 meters in this calculus. And the idea is you have an angle of 45 grades, and you can make a trigonometrical calculus to obtain the distance, the variation of distance when you want to or would go to the point B when you have the imbalance between different winds. It's really complicated because the instrument that talk about Llull is this. Because you have in this circle all the winds, because you have more than 2 or 3 winds in a route, and you have to appreciate and value all the influence of the different winds. Depends of the time and depends of especially the season and the time that takes go to one point to another. It's quite complicated. This is quite complicated, but the navigation expert about the history of this kind of instrument, they has doubts about the use of this instrument in the 13th century, especially in the region of Mallorca. But they recognize that Ramon Llull talk about this instrument. And now we continue with Buridano's sentence that talk about the Reo Barbarum and Magnes. The Buridano's sentence begins with a generalization about the action of pharmaceutic effects of rhubarb and the attractive qualities of magnet. Omne Reo Barbarum est purgativum cholera, vel omnis magnes, vel adamas est attractivus ferri. Llull said in the quotation above that attraction is a natural quality and is in an issue for natural research. Meanwhile, in 14th century, Buridanus could establish the sentence omnis magnes est attractivus. In the middle of 13th century, it still was a matter of natural experience with a certain obscure part. As Roger Bacon says in the text number 5, nam quantum cumque aliquis ignorant per experientiam attractionem ferri per adamantem fieri probaret efficacius per argumentum quod ec attractiot esset possibilis in natura tamen nunquam certificaretur nisi ad oculum videret experientiam ut quo libet escit de seipso. In this perspective, a natural philosopher or a physician keep a set of experiential observations which are enough to support the sentence omne reu barbarum est purgativum or omni magnes veladamas est attractivus ferri. Certainly, this sentence can prove by a syllogistic argument, but without natural observation, none could reach a complete knowledge of those facts. About the relation between experience and arguments, in logical sense, Ramon Llull in the Livre de Contemplació, approximately 1278, attributes to a philosopher at the same time logician and natural researcher the quality of sapienis. In Catalan is the quotation number 6. Home qui sia subtil senier per moltes lettres e per moltes exprobacions e per molts experiments. Subtilea, in Catalan, sapienis, is the ability of put in logical proofs, exprobations, in contact with natural experiences, experiments. One of those is magnetism mentioned above. In other words, a self-formation novel, De Felix or Livre de Meravilles, Llull describes a character who represents a philosophical background of the second half of the 13th century. The a philosopher, says about magnetism, is the text number 6, the second part. Felix la saman a virtut per la qual l'aguglia se gira la tresmontana et a migjorn, et la saman est tan fort en sa sequedat que no pot lo foc fonder, lo qual foc fon lo ferre. It's quite interesting, this idea of attraction of iron by the adamas or the magnets. Yes, this is the experientia. But in this phrase, Ramon Llull, as Petrus Peregrinus, said that in air you have a magnetic force that attracts the needle, the magnet's needle. Llull takes advantage from natural observation to introduce an argument about the relation of attractive forces between magnet and iron. Furthermore, he mentioned other experience, the comparison between the melting point of magnet and iron. Thus, the elements in this quotation remind to the description of Selene that we can read in Ars Generalis. Actually, we can understand why Llull puts together magnet and tresmontana, a kind of north wind that pushed the vessels in Mediterranean Sea. In fact, Llull tries to describe the construction of homemade navigation instrument, a magnetic compass. This experiment was described some years before De Felix by Pierre de Maricourt in his Epistolae. In this work, Pierre, an army engineer of Angevin forces, tells us how to build a magnetic compass on a bowl of water with a magnetic needle. The magnetic needle lies on the water. This is a school basic science experience. Please access YouTube. Turns and signs the north magnetic pole. According to Llull language, the north is the direction where the north wind, tresmontana, comes from and the high point of the sun in the midday, migjorn. The example of the Lullian works, it is really interesting because he was a layman without a scholastic formation. In fact, he described it in vernacular language, the magnet observation, some years after the probable date of Pierre's epistolae. The question is, where Llull had sought this information? A hypothesis is the Llull family business, trade. From Mallorca to the rest of Mediterranean ports in Italy and North Africa, there were well-known maritime routes that allowed the commercial relation among these Mediterranean regions. The profits of the Llull's family business depended on the experience of the sailors that carried on commodities, among them slaves and manufacturers between different commercial centers, such as Barcelona, Valence, Geneva, Venice, and so on. If we observe the magnetism description in vernacular, together with two aspects of subtle philosopher who knows how to make arguments and experiments, we can understand how the scholastic notion of experientia was disseminated in vernacular circles. In the case of Llull, this was due to the commercial relation in the Mediterranean. The terms exprobación, experiments in Catalan indicate the two phases of the experientia that I have been trying to introduce you. The spiral relation in words of Averroes between particular singular in contact with the extra-animal objects, experiments, and the comprehension of general conceptions, exprobations. We cannot forget either an additional element, the application of general conceptions in singular as a sailor leading a vessel or a carpenter crafting a ship. In the spiral analogy quoted before, the following elements are settled: singular, species, or general concept, and productive, or the application real. Okay. In Aquinas' perspective, there is a secondary relation between craftsman and sailor, and Llull shows a similar dependence in sailing art between the geometrical instrument and the knowledge of winds. So we can enrich this relation by the application of the spiral analogy about experientia to other disciplines, for instance, as Llull did. This is the text number 7. Verum tamen sic ut quatur tempora anni badunt in circuito indict terrae, it assigna badunt in circuito terrae secundum a situationem veris, a statis autumni et iemis, et si philosophi un cursum erraberum, non est mirandum. This broad perspective about experientia includes philosophers' mistakes, because the singular contact with extra-animal objects doesn't work fine every time. Nevertheless, Llull points that we have common conception about the seasons or the motions of stars, even though philosophers make mistakes. Non est mirandum. The Catalan version of this text insists in the same fact. Is not a coincidence, and there is no reason to be shocked about that. Vernacular sources usually show fails in the scholastic proud science. One of them is that experience is a risk and a could be worse than anyone expected. It is the case of the relation between experientia and fortune in the medieval vernacular encyclopedia Le Roman de la Rose. This is the next slide about fortune. This is the experiential relation with moral and world things. The Roman is a huge opera, more than 20,000 verses written by two authors, Guillaume de Lorry, Jean de Meaux, during 70 years at 13th century. The second part, wrote by Jean de Meaux, echoes the mention in the first part to the fortune wheel. The fate game between the top and the low part of the wheel is the constant dynamic of life. Some people is wealthy, powerful, beautiful, or famous. Others are poor, servants, ugly, or dismissed. The game is the change of roles that happens when the people on the top fall to the down part and suffered people ascend to the top. This destiny is awkward classical topic in the contemporary theories about liberum arbitrium and predestinatione. The Roman, at least in the second part, seems to follow the Boethian conception of the wheel of fortune as a topic related to knowledge of singular facts gathered in the world. The main issue is how a man, in the middle of this dynamic, can figure out a science about the fortune. For instance, the relation between friendship and fortune is the first test, is the 13,371. Oh, sorry. No, yes, okay. Université de la Science. No, sorry, is the fourth one, 5,000. And you can see the use of the keywords experiment, prouver, profit, aversités, prosperities, and que passest en l'ignorance par aversité science. No? Que le fait leur ami trouvé. In these verses, the science of fortune is reached by the knowledge of frustrations and losses, which remind us to Consolatio passage, where Boethius told us how he felt in the middle of a word's labyrinth, but the support of philosophia helped him to recover the light of wisdom. In fact, the following verses of Roman lead us to the recognition of how hard experiences push wisdom. This is the first one. Expériment, mais on fait sage. In other places, Le Roman suggests a critic point of view of experience in a sensory and emotional way. Astronomy, for instance, provides a caution advice. Representation of stars are different from knowledge of heavens because images or representation are generated by the failure of our pleasant experience of zodiac. This is the text, the third text is 19,247. Is the loin semble trop délicieuse et après de seros méconnaissance, not complete knowledge, and le service et l'acquittance par le défaut d'expérience. Besides, Roman tells us the reason why the Almagest is the way to know accurately what is the meaning of zodiac representations. These zodiac representations are in the garden where the Roman happens. The Roman characters enjoy the images, but they be aware about the decadence of the sweetness and pleasure that images transmit. That means the fortune or our emotions. In many senses, Roman points in vernacular diverse perspectives about experience that can be gathered in the following. I think is the second one, the 15,000. Yes, just this. And in this test, you have a bad experience of the awful experience, but you have two elements. The raison is probable, the experiment is a proof, but you don't find this in a writing source. Ils sont en écrit trouvé. Experience makes science and wisdoms, but as the nature of experience shows, the knowledge reached by provisional is provisional, no complete, and sometimes its outcomes are unpleasant. In sum, this ars experimentalis was depicted by the transmission of the spiral analogy and the emergence of productive arts in a vernacular intellectual atmosphere where experience was not complete and suffered the failure of human knowledge limits. Thank you very much.